So this really came about from just the fact that there was a time period where we were talking about Google Fiber coming to Tempe. We were on the list was going along, and then Google made the business decision, completely unrelated to Tempe, that they just weren't going to be rolling this out again in another phase. And so Tempe and other parts of the United States just sort of went to the wayside with that, which is understandable. They're a business. They make business decisions. At that point, I wanted to bring this forward to try and figure out ways to increase competition. Councilmember Shapiro asked me to wait just a little while. I respect that, so we waited until he got done with his other committee, and then he and I brought this forward. The initial thought of it was not an end-driven result. It was really, wasn't a, we didn't want a thing, but we wanted a result. The result being greater speeds, greater customer service, greater competition, lower prices. How we got there was not really, the thing. And so initially we sort of looked into the idea of the city getting into the internet business. When we looked at some of the other communities that do it, many of them do it marginally. It's tough to do it efficiently. It's tough to do it cost effectively. There are high startup capital costs. And so we thought, you know what, this probably isn't the way to go. But that doesn't alleviate all of the things we're trying to accomplish, right? More competition, lower prices, better customer service, faster speeds. And so the conclusion that we came to was that we really need to look at ways to remove barriers of entry, because high-speed internet, for good or bad, is perceived by some as a utility and lends itself to being a natural monopoly, meaning that through no fault of anyone's, there tends to only be one or two providers. Just barriers of entry. And so what we focused on was, how do we remove those barriers of entry? And the thing that we came across actually ties in very good to what we voted on just a little while ago, and that is we had an innovative IT department manager who said, look, when we're tearing up the streets, why don't we put in fiber? Because we're tearing them up anyway, and the fiber is relatively cheap to put in. It's practically cost-free after you put it in. There's very little service of it. It doesn't go bad. It's got a very long life frame. And so 5+ years ago, every time we tear up a street to put in a new water pipe, we're putting down fiber anyway. Just a few weeks ago, council voted on, I want to say it was $1.4 or $2 million, to run fiber on Rural Road from our north border to our south border as part of our lighting timing and lighting feedback, so that we could do that. And again, if you're digging up the street anyway, you can put one strand of fiber in just as cheap as you can put in, 1,000, because it's just glass. There's nothing expensive about it. It's the digging is the hard part. And so what we thought is let's try and remove these barriers of entry and allow people to tap into our unused bandwidth capacity. So somebody could go to us conceivably at Rural and Broadway and say, look, I'm not going to build out the whole city, but let me tap into your fiber. Let me provide internet to Hughes Acres or Broadmoor or whatever, and we'll just bill them for using our excess fiber capacity. And of course, that revenue can be used to continue to build out future excess fiber capacity in other areas. Now, if this all sounds like something that the city doesn't have a great deal of expertise in, the answer is probably yes. Certainly, I would say for myself, it's not an area I have a great deal of expertise in. I don't know, is wireless technology going to make this, like cell phone technology, going to make all fiber obsolete? Is this something other cities or nations have tried that have failed? Is this, et cetera, et cetera? How would we even bill someone? Could we bill by the gigabyte? What are the issues in conflict with federal guidelines? Would the federal government prevent us from doing this, et cetera? You can see where it gets a bit beyond the scope of a Cal working group from a knowledge standpoint. So the conclusion that David and I came to was to take this general idea of allowing people to lease our bandwidth, but hiring a consultant to try and put together a framework and say, look, this is a good idea. Singapore does this and it works fine for them. Whoever does this, it works fine for them. Whoever tried this, it doesn't work fine for them. Here's how they did their pricing model, whatever. And maybe look at Rural Road and the areas along it and immediately adjacent to it as a place that down the road, we would do RFPs and start talking to people about doing pilot programs of rolling out competitive internet in those areas, so that Cox is great, but they're the Delta or whatever a high tier internet service provider is, and the way you get a cheaper flight to LA is to have 9 airlines competing for your business, not to have one airline competing for your business, telling you, trust us, we're the best low cost customer service leader.